Hi there, 8th grade students and parents. Now we are on lesson 3 of module 5, interpret and graph proportional relationships. So let's look at the I can statement. I can graph proportional relationships from a table or equation, calculate the unit rate, and determine whether the graph should be continuous or discrete. So that continuous and discrete might be new vocabulary, but the rest might be sort of a little bit of review from what you've been doing in the last couple lessons. So let's look at the spark you're learning. An airplane is traveling toward its destination at a constant speed. The distance that the airplane has traveled at different points in time is shown in the table. How can you find the speed of the airplane? So that's going to speak to the unit rate. And for this lesson or this activity, you need some graph paper, a straight edge or ruler is helpful, and a pencil. So go ahead and work on that. Use the table and answer that question. And then when you're finished, you can do this turn and talk if you'd like. It's pretty interesting. And then go ahead and when you finish that, go to the build understanding. So let's look at the build understanding. Number 1, the commercial plane table in Spark Your Learning. So here they're going to refer back to this. Shows data that can be graphed on a coordinate plane where x is the time passed. So here I kind of did this. So x is time and they have it in hours, and y is the distance traveled and they have that in miles. So A says one of the points for 1600. So they want you to describe what that point represents. So if you think about it, this is your x. In this case, it would be 4. This is 1600. Tell what that means. So B, the airplane travels at a constant rate, so the relationship between distance and time is proportional. You already know that the unit rate of a proportional relationship can be calculated from any point on a graph of the relationship. And remember, the unit rate is where if you think about it as a ratio or a fraction, the denominator is 1. So for this, in this instance, how far can it travel in 1 hour? Use the point 3, 1200 to calculate the number of miles that the airplane travels per hour. So instead of 3 here, they want 1. So how would that change? What would be the unit rate if you wanted this x coordinate to be 1? What would this y coordinate be? C, a second airplane starts from the same airport and is traveling at a different constant speed. After 4 hours, the second airplane has flown 2,100 miles, from the airport. Calculate the number of miles that second plane traveled per hour. So again, this is the time, 4 hours, and this is the distance, 2,100 miles. You want this to be 1, so what has to change here to get that hours as a 1? D, complete the table to show the distance that the second airplane has traveled at different points in time. Graph the points on the coordinate plane. So for D, you're using this information for the second plane, and you'll fill in this table and coordinate or mark it on this coordinate plane. E, what can you conclude about the distance that the 2 airplanes will have traveled after 8 hours? So what would be the difference in, would one have traveled farther or would they be the same, etc. And then you can also do this turn and talk if you'd like to do that. So take some time, pause here, and then you can go on to the next page. So now let's look at the step it out. Number 2, a fish tank is filling at a constant rate. The equation modeling the amount of water in the tank is y equals 5 times x, where y represents the amount of water in gallons and x represents the amount of time passed in minutes. Use the equation to complete the table. So let's look at A. Substitute 1 for x in the equation to find the amount of water in the tank after 1 minute. So here they want you to put 1 in for x and then solve for y. And then they want you to fill in this table. So if you did 1 as x, what did you get here? That would go in this space here. 0, if it's 0 equals x. And so remember, you're using this equation And you're going to use these values for x each time to fill in the values for y. And then it says B, substitute the remaining values for x in the equation and complete the table. That's what we they wanted you to do. C, graph the points from the table. So this is the graph you'll use here. And then D, describe what the point 4.5, 22.5 represents. And they give you a little sentence starter here. After how many minutes the tank contains how many gallons using this point. So you can go ahead and pause there, work on that, and then go on to number 3. All right, let's look at number 3. It says you have used a continuous graph to represent different situations, such as an airplane's distance traveled. A discrete graph is a graph made of unconnected points. It represents data that only makes sense at certain points. A continuous graph is a graph made up of connected points or curves. The table here shows how much a tailor charges to hem different numbers of shirts. Would it make sense for the table to include the cost of hemming 2.5 or 2.5 shirts? Explain. So that's going to help you think about what's the difference between a discrete graph and a continuous graph. For example, the airplane or the fish tank, you can connect all those points because there are little milliseconds in between each minute or half minute or whatever. But on a graph like this or a table like this, you have to think about, would it make sense to include the cost of hemming 2.5 shirts? So let's look at B. Graph the ordered pairs from the table. Decide whether or not to connect the points with a solid line. Should the graph be discrete, where it just has points that are not connected, or continuous, where you end up connecting those points in a straight line? Why? So why would you do one or the other? And then C, how many shirts can a customer have hemmed with $10 and then with $50? So you can use the graph or finish, like keep going with the table. Once you finish, pause the video and finish number 3, then you can go on to the check understanding that you do on your own. Once you complete the check understanding and you feel comfortable with what you've learned, you can go ahead and do this on your own page independently. So it's these 2 pages actually. And then again, this homework page is optional if you want to keep working, and even if you feel comfortable, if you want to do some more problems, you can do this. If not, you can skip it. It is an optional page. Do the test prep and the spiral review if you have time, because those are really helpful just to keep you thinking about different things that you've learned as you've gone along so far. This is the end of lesson 3, and so we'll see you in the next video.